Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Central Coast Ordinary Meeting of the 26th of October. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we are meeting today and pay my respect to elders both past and present. I now declare the meeting open. So in line with the public health orders and the stay-at-home requirements, which have had such a significant impact on how we work and function in our daily lives, until such that time that requirements are lifted, council meetings will be held remotely and the public can attend by way of a webcast. Today's meeting again will look different to our viewers at home. To adhere to physical distancing requirements, we have our team operating remotely and we are in the safety of our own environments. Operating council meetings can pose challenges, and I may need to be in contact with staff during the course of the meeting via the chat or text message. So if you see me doing something strange down the bottom, that's what I'm doing. It is a changing way of working for us all, so thank you for your understanding. We may experience technical issues. They always seem to somehow creep in when you least expect them, but we will navigate our way through all of this to tonight's meeting. And if there are some issues, please be patient with us. Since we are being webcast, any of those people who are participating, make sure that your phones and other technology is off, because they can interfere with the images and so on. And just be mindful that if you're saying something that it is broadcast and recorded. So I'm now going to just tell you a little bit about what's been happening at council. I mean, the first thing is I'm actually doing this from the office. So this is the first week that I've been able to be back on the coast, and I have to say it's great to be back up here. And I'm thoroughly enjoying it, and the weather's been kind to me as well. One of the nicest things that we ever do as an administrator or a mayor gets to do is citizenship. And we've had the great honour of recommencing virtual citizenship ceremonies for residents of the Central Coast region over the last fortnight. And we've had over 60 countries represented, and over 350 citizens have been confirmed as new Aussies. Our role in welcoming new citizens to the Central Coast region is one we greatly value, and we hope that our newest citizens enjoy living in the area. We will be looking to host another 5 virtual ceremonies, one a fortnight over the next month or so, and pending COVID restrictions, we hope to move towards having in-person ceremonies from December onwards. And they're always much more enjoyable, I have to say, when it's in person and, and friends and family can attend. Yesterday, we opened the Woy Woy Wharf. I was joined by the Parliamentary Secretary for the Central Coast, Adam Crouch, MP, and the member for Gosford, Liesl Tench, was also present. Adam and I opened the state-of-the-art Woy Woy Wharf, which features floating pontoon, accessibility features, solar lighting, and smart benches with mobile phone charging capability. It's going to make a huge difference, particularly with the wheelchair lifting devices and the access for people who are disadvantaged in some way or other. It's covered, so the weather should have no more impact. And tides, even king tides, you shouldn't get your feet wet because, of course, the pontoon is floating. Woy Woy Town Centre is a great facility and something that the coast can be really proud of. And with the other amenities that are already there, and being able to now draw visitors as well as just commuters, I expect that we will hopefully see some more economic activity starting to happen in that particular area. I have to put a big thank you out to the New South Wales government for Adam actually getting that contribution of 3.99 million that went towards delivering this great project. The council contribution was 1.66 million. We are out at the moment consulting with the community on our SRV. We wish to maintain the current SRV for a further 7 years after the 3 years have expired. And we had our first meeting with the Central Coast Council Community Reference Group to discuss this last Thursday. I hope to be out and about over the next couple of months, meeting with various community groups and residents to discuss the SRV, including holding some open days with the administrator on this topic. And further details on this and the timings will be forthcoming over the next week or so. I do continue to meet with local members of Parliament to discuss their key concerns and any grant opportunities. And I have to say, all the politicians are being very good about trying to be helpful in terms of the sort of funding and grants that they get for us, because we basically cannot take on brand new projects even if we're given the money, because of the operating expenditure and the depreciation that has to be charged against those projects. And of course, we don't have the income to do that. So the CEO and I've also had the pleasure of meeting with the new CEO and chair of the Darkinjung Local Aboriginal Land Council, and largely talking about discussing the future collaboration with council. They are a great group of people. They do a fabulous job out there, and we sort of have a bit of a unique situation because they are by far and away the major and dominant group out there. And of course, it means that we can sit down with them, and I hope hopefully there'll be some joint opportunities which can further their aims and ambitions, and that we can also do well out of it as well. Also, I met with the chair of the Wamberal Seawall Advisory Task Force, along with a bunch of other experts and so on. David was there, David Farmer, CEO, and we talked about some of the options there. The residents there made their views very clear, and having come from the Northern Beaches and having been the CEO at Warringah Council, which has the issue of Coleroy, I'm somewhat familiar with the issues there, and I just have to say they're very difficult to solve. The public inquiry has now drawn to a close. It was evident throughout this process just the sheer complexity surrounding the issue and the accounting processes and reporting of council. I can appreciate how some of this may have caused some confusion in our community. However, it is important that where there's been one or two misunderstandings of figures or timeframes, and I believe that needs to be clarified just so that we get an accurate record. So the Commissioner has offered for those who have previously made a written submission or given oral evidence to the inquiry to be able to put a further submission in, a written one, by no later than the 3rd of November. I intend to put in a submission in reply to the Commissioner that further clarifies just some of the data that was placed on the table during the Commission, just so that we've got a correct and true record of everything that took place. Now, moving to the council meeting, I note that an open forum will not be conducted this evening, as we've had no requests to speak from community members. There were also no requests to speak from community members for the public forum, that's on council papers, which somewhat surprises me because there's a couple of rather interesting papers there. Anyway, be that as it may, we'll move on. So I will now commence the ordinary meeting. So item 1.1, disclosures of interest. I have no conflicts of interest to declare, so I'll have to ask the staff, are there any conflicts to declare? Wave your hands if you have any. Nope, it's the answer to that. So I will now ask to resolve the resolution that is displayed on the screen. Item 1.2, the confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting. I have read the minutes of the meeting. I can confirm that they are full and accurate. So I would like to now resolve to adopt the resolution that is displayed on the screen now. Item 1.3, notice of intention to deal with matters in closed session. There are no matters to dealing with in closed session, and we haven't had some for a very long time. So we have been very open in this council, and I think that's great to see. So with no matters, we'll now move to adopt the resolution that is shown on the screen. We now get into the main substance of the council meeting tonight, and the first paper that I will consider is the Gwondolen reclassification operational land to community land. This is a slightly oddball thing that we're doing here, but I will let the director, Scott Cox, just explain it to the community exactly why we're sort of doing a couple of steps which seem sort of counterintuitive. But anyway, I'll let Scott tell you more about it.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. In terms of the proposal, it's for the reclassification of a site at Paraweena Road, Gwondolen. And this site forms part of a proposed new town centre for Gwondolen. This was adopted by Council in December of last year, and the reclassification will enable a possible future sale of the land to be incorporated into the approved Gwondolen Town Centre proposal. I'll just go to the next slide to identify the parcel of land, please. The parcel of land is actually the area shaded in blue, and its approximate size of just under 9,000 square metres. Now, the process that the administrator spoke about is a little bit double handling in terms of reclassification, but the reason why we have to reclassify from back to community land is that back in 2013, during the making of the Wyong Local Environmental Plan, the land was reclassified to operational. However, it was placed in the incorrect schedule within the LEP, so the interests in that land were not correctly discharged. Now, the process going forward in discharging interests in land is a two-stage process, and that two-stage process is identified in the practice note set out by the Department of Planning, Environment and Infrastructure. So stage one of this process, is before council tonight to complete, is the reclassification of operational land back to community land. And then once that's adopted, it then goes into stage two, and then to reclassify it back to operational land. Just in terms of the site itself, some of the surrounding land uses is obviously the Gwendolyn Town Centre site. There's also the sewage treatment plant, and also there's existing industrial lands and some environmental conservation, environmental living areas around the site. In terms of, and that's just a high level concept of what's proposed as part of a Gwendolyn Town Centre, where we've got a number of retail shops, a supermarket, a town square and a village green, possible childcare centre, and obviously car parking for those uses. Now, in terms of timing, just go to the next slide. Where the boxed area is on the third line there, that's where we are tonight. We're reporting to council. We've had a public notice outcome where we received one submission. And so the next stage is to go into stage two, where a planning proposal will be prepared to reclassify the site back to operational and discharge those existing public interests. This will involve further public consultation and also the holding of a public hearing to enable community input into the proposal. Thank you, Mr. Administrator.
Yes, thank you. I would just make a comment on that last slide. I found that extremely useful, and I just would suggest as any papers that are coming forward to council actually do have that little timeline sitting in there, because it actually makes it quite clear as to what's actually happening and the time frame that it's going to occur in. So I rather like that, and I found it very helpful. So we might want to consider that, using that in future reports. But with that, I will now move to resolve or adopt the resolutions that are displayed on the screen to enable that process to get underway. Item 2.2, another one in the planning area. So this is a response to a notice of motion titled The Forgotten North Gateway Disgrace. A very intriguing one, but again, I'll let Mr. Scott take you through that one.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. Tonight's report is in response to a council notice of motion of September last year, and basically the council resolution called for some actions to be undertaken by staff in writing to a number of state government agencies and also to a private landholder about the condition of a number of the properties in Toukley and Gorican, and also to just the status of whether or not any improvements were going to be done. Now, this first site here, this is a private development, a mixed-use development that was granted consent a number of years ago. Construction stalled over 10 years ago. It was former Wyong Council went to court to try and seek consent orders for the development to be completed. Part of the resolution was for council staff to seek legal advice about pursuing the completion of the development. The legal advice coming back was that it's very difficult to enforce the completion of a development once it has started. But since the resolution last year was approved by council, the property has recently sold. I believe it was sold in August, and staff have been quick to make contact with the new owners about working with them to try and progress the development to its completion. We understand that the new owners are planning an amendment to the original consent to bring it up to some contemporary standards. So we'll continue to liaise with the new owners to see when they're going to lodge their modification to the consent, and hopefully move forward to completing the site. This is the Fish Co-op site, which is owned by the Department of Lands. Council staff wrote to the Department of Lands, and the advice coming back from the Department of Lands was that they were going to lodge a development application for the demolition of this building. They have since lodged that development application, and it's in the process of being determined now. So once they've obtained an approval for the demolition, they'll progress works to clean up that particular site. And in terms of assets and structures owned by the Transport for New South Wales, there was some work sheds that had been erected that had been forgotten to be removed. They've since been removed, and also to some work around the Toukley Bridge as well. So the purpose of tonight's report is to just give a status update on some of the actions that were resolved by council for staff to follow up on.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. As I note, the legal advice obtained that no further action should be taken on the basis of cost. However, it's great to hear that there is going to be some movement on both properties in terms of something happening, and that'll be great and something to look forward to. So with that, I'll move to adopt the resolutions that are displayed on the screen for item 2.2. We'll now move to item 2.3, which is the consideration of submissions and adoption of the Central Coast Disability Inclusion Action Plan 2021 to 2025. And I'll ask Ms. Julie Vaughan, who's the Director of Community and Recreation Services, to just take us through some of the key highlights of the submissions we received and just how well it has been received.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. Council's first Disability Inclusion Action Plan 2017 to 2021 finished at the end of June. The new Disability Inclusion Action Plan 2021 to 2025 has been informed by research and consultation with people with disability living on the Central Coast and with Council's Access and Inclusion Reference Group. It's been drafted in accordance with the Disability Inclusion Act 2014 and a New South Wales Disability Inclusion Action Planning Guidelines. The intent of the plan is not just to meet compliance with legislation, but to create genuine, livable and universally designed places and spaces. The DIAP builds on Council's Disability Inclusion Action Plan of 2017 to 21 and is about a process of continuing to improve access and inclusion for people with disability here on the coast. The draft plan was exhibited from the 16th of August until the 13th of September 2021, and 21 submissions were received. The 4 focus areas in the plan include increasing positive attitudes and behaviours towards people with disability, making the Central Coast more accessible, inclusive and livable communities, increasing employment of people with disability in meaningful roles at council and within the community, and improving access to mainstream council services through better systems and processes. 12 units across council are responsible for delivering actions in a plan, and it is important for all areas of council to involve and consider people with lived experiences of disability when making decisions, planning and providing programs, services and facilities. All actions have been inputted by unit managers. The Disability Inclusion Action Plan is aligned with Council's integrated planning and reporting framework, with progress on the plan being reported in Council's annual report. A copy of the plan is also to be provided to the Minister of Family, Community and Disability Services. I recommend a strategy for endorsement.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughan. I think it's a good document, and I think it's great that we're actually making sure that all of our staff are aware of it. and that as they develop their business plans and their project plans, that they are taking into consideration and into account the requirements as noted in the action plan. So I think that's good, and that and I know the staff have bought into that. So I look forward to us producing some pretty good capital projects down the track, which will, in actual fact, accommodate all the requirements and the needs of our total community. So with that, I'm going to resolve to adopt the resolutions that are displayed on the screen. Then we'll move to item 2.4, which is consideration of submissions and adoption of the Central Coast Positively Ageing Strategy 2021 to 2026. And I have to just declare a slight interest in this, being an ageing person, I suppose. Anyway, I'll ask Ms. Vaughan to just take us through some of the key highlights of this strategy.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. The Positive Ageing Strategy provides the strategic direction for how Council can better deliver services that support our older residents to age healthy, feel connected and enjoy an age-friendly community. On the Central Coast, 27% of the region's population are aged over 60. This represents nearly 90,000 people. By 2036, the number of people aged over 60 is expected to increase by almost 35,000 people. It is our commitment over the next 5 years guiding us to plan, develop and implement programs, activities, services and infrastructure that respond to the changing needs and aspirations of our growing population. The Positive Ageing Strategy has been informed by what our older residents have told us, their aspirations and their expectations, as well as research and consultation with relevant service providers. 4 key themes have emerged, providing the focus of where Council can make a difference: social connections and participation, being better informed and tech savvy, staying healthy and active, and age-friendly places and spaces. The draft Central Coast Positive Ageing Strategy was developed during 2019-20 and placed on exhibition from September 14 to 11th of October 2020. 27 submissions were received and reviewed. There has been a delay in finalising the strategy following recent organisational restructures, and as a result, 23 of those actions have been simplified and reworded, with the intent of these actions largely remaining the same and untouched. 22 actions have been deleted, as 7 of those were able to be rolled into other actions, and 1 has been covered by the broader active lifestyle strategy. The plan is designed to be implemented over 5 years. There is no additional budget required for 2021. Service business units will be delivering the required actions and budgets accordingly within budgets over the future years. I recommend a strategy for endorsement.
Now, just one question. I understand, Ms. Vaughan, that the Central Coast actually has one of the highest population of older people, if I recall. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Administrator. Historically, it's been advised that up to 5 times the state average. So we have quite a highly represented older population and younger population. Yes,
and that's why I think it is terribly important that we do have this type of strategy. And again, as in the previous paper, that the staff inside the organisation also, as they're developing projects and capital items, that they actually are taking into consideration both the ageing population and those with disabilities. So I think these 2 papers that actually form broad policy directions and give clear direction to staff in the way forward, I think is a really positive move forward. So yes, I'm very happy to resolve to adopt the resolutions that are displayed on the screen. Then we'll move to item 2.5, which is the Community Support Grant Program. I've read the paper. It's a program where we have a total budget of some 300,000, which is allocated out during the year. Important point to note for the community is that the ability to apply is open throughout the year, so it's still not too late to apply for some support for a grant for any reasons you might think it might be helpful for. But it is there to sort of try and develop capacity and go towards small projects that will make a difference. So there is more money that will come out during the rest of the year. And this report recommends the allocation of $58,371 to actually go out to a variety of good deeds. So with that, I shall resolve to adopt the resolutions that are displayed on the screen. Item 2.6, which is the proposed policy, communications and media relations. Now, this isn't so much a public policy, this is actually an internal policy, and it's part of what I would call the machinery of government. And it is just designed to make sure that we are clear inside our organisation what the roles of the mayor, councillors, CEO and staff are when it comes to using social media and when it comes to making statements on behalf of council. So this policy clarifies all of that and will be adopted as I resolve to adopt the resolution that is displayed on the screen. Item 2.7, the postponement of the constitutional referendum. The previous administrator decided, in conjunction with myself as the acting CEO at the time, that we would like to have a referendum to determine the future number of councillors for the Central Coast. The original proposal was to look at potentially 9 councillors, of whom 1 would be elected as a mayor. Now, the original intention was to do all that at the election timeframe, which would have been the 4th of September this year. But as the community is aware, 2 things have happened. 1, the state government has delayed the local body elections until the 4th of December this year. And the second thing is that the minister put in place an order which said that there cannot be a local body election for the Central Coast until after June the 8th next year. So with that, we're looking to actually hold the referendum at the time of the next council election. And that saves us some considerable sums of money, as shown in the report, approximately $1.3 million. So that's a saving that is well worth doing. And so therefore, the first 2 resolutions there note the report on the postponement of the constitutional referendum and the savings made. And we confirm the intention to hold a referendum on a date to be decided, but likely to be in conjunction with the next general election for the local government area. And as I said, such an approach would reduce the cost and inconvenience imposed upon the community. I'm also going to add a 3rd recommendation to this. And that recommendation will read that the administrator write to the Minister for Local Government recommending that the next general election for the Central Coast region be conducted in September/October 2022 and in conjunction with the constitutional referendum. So that would mean that I am proposing to hold to the Minister, because she is the person who makes the decision, that there will be an election in September next year, or October next year, and at that time, the referendum will be held, and the results of that referendum will be applied to the following local government election, which will take place in September 2024. So we'd need to wait 2 years before the result could be put into practice. So with that, I resolve to adopt those 3 resolutions that are now displayed on the screen. Item 2.8, the pecuniary interest disclosure returns for 2021. This again is a machinery of government requirement, and we will now resolve to adopt the resolution that is displayed on the screen. And now we move into the financial area, and as has become our norm, we do have the investment report up first for September 2021. And I'm going to ask Natalia Cowley, who is the Director of Corporate Affairs and Chief Financial Officer, to take us through the investment report, and particularly, of course, the status of our unrestricted cash and our internally and externally restricted cash balances, because clearly cash has been the problem of the council, and that is something we are keeping an extremely close eye on. So if Ms. Cowley's there, could she please just explain the position we're at as of the end of September?
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. The investment report for September 2021 represents a very pleasing result, probably the best thus far since the beginning of the financial crisis for council. The deficit position in the water fund and drainage fund is consistent to the prior month of about $47.6 million being in deficits, but we have been able to bring the general fund unrestricted funds to $28 million, as I explained last month. This is a fluctuating amount that is determined by the amount of rates that council receives and the expenditure that occurs, specifically in the general fund. And this month, the unrestricted funds is in a positive cash balance of $28 million. So the $47.6 million in deficits that are in the water fund and the drainage fund for unrestricted cash are going to be offset by utilizing the $28 million of unrestricted funds, cash available in the general fund, and then the remaining amount from the internally restricted funds. Again, as I mentioned last month, this balance in the general fund will be fluctuating based on the receipts of funds, but this month it is a really positive result. For the purposes of transparency, with the removal of lines in tables, I just want to highlight that this month council has removed 3 rows within the current status table, which is the state table that you see on page 2. And the reason for the removal of the lines is because they are actually provided in the table below. So rather than blending all the restricted funds and the unrestricted funds into one sum total, which we know that isn't going to be easily deciphered by people, we are breaking that specifically under external restrictions, internal restrictions, and unrestricted funds by fund in the table below. And so that is the reason why those 2 rows have been removed. Other than that, the performance of the portfolio is once again pleasing. Our weighted running yield for September is 0.93%, which is favorable compared to the rolling 3-year benchmark bank bill swap rate of 0.69%. Thank you, Mr. Administrator.
Thank you, Ms. Carley. It's a great result, and it's good to see that we are very slowly starting to build up our cash position, which is what we forecast would happen, and it's nice to see it coming to fruition. For the community, it's just very important that there has been some confusion about the fact that we are using internally restricted funds. It's quite lawful for the council to do that, provided that it does just as it is shown in these recommendations, where it resolves to actually unrestrict funds to make up the difference. Council creates the internally restricted, and it can unrestrict those internally restricted. So we just make the point in there, and we will be for some time yet, hopefully for not that much longer, where we have to do that just to make sure that we have got enough cash available. So it makes us lawful by actually unrestricting some of the internally restricted funds for the specific purpose of doing this. So with that, I'm going to now resolve to adopt the resolutions that are displayed on the screen. And then we come to item 2.10, which is the monthly financial report. As the community is aware, we undertook to produce a monthly financial report which shows our income and expenditure and how we're travelling. I'm going to ask the Chief Executive, Mr. David Farmer, to just take us through the first quarter's results.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. And in conjunction with the report provided by Ms. Cowley, we see a continuation of a very sound financial performance this year to date. And I think it's salient that we reflect on this in the basis of where we have been, in as much as we run 2 deficits of close enough to $90 million for the last 2 years. And late last year, early next year, the former administrator and yourself, Mr. Hart, as the CEO at the time, set a direction to establish a small surplus budget for next year, being the year we're in. And we're now in a process of following that and achieving that. And it's a really significant turnaround in the fortunes of the organisation. I'll just refer any members of the public who are looking at this business paper on the internet and have downloaded it to either page 53 of the main agenda or to page 8 of the attachments to the agenda. Page 8 of the first attachment, which is the financial report. And what's interesting is that the organisation has yet again had a month where we've performed better than budget, and on top of that, we've been able to keep major cost items under control. What's interesting is our income is actually below estimate, driven by a range of factors, not least of which was some shortfalls in income due to COVID, where we've had to have certain facilities that aren't available to the public. But likewise, we've been able to keep our costs under quite significant control. And so at this stage, our total costs for this year are about $19 million less as a consolidated entity than they were, than was budget. And even more significantly, they're almost $28 million less than the same period last year. So it shows how significantly this organisation has been able to practice significant cost control. I draw your attention to the employee cost line, and for the year to date, this year, our total employee costs are $38,154,000 compared to a budget of $43 million, so around $5 million less than budget. But absolutely critically, last year at the same time, our total employee cost line was 52.58. So that's about a $15 million lower wages line this year than last year. A number of people may well have tuned into the IPART submission on water and sewer this morning, and a member of the public made some comments about wages costs and the fact that wages costs have come up. And he really referred to comments that the former administrator may have made in December last year, and those were correct, that council's wages costs had been growing at a faster rate than the rest of the organisation, and certainly at a faster rate than income. But what we can see here is that has significantly come under control, and there is a graph on page 7 of the attachment, which shows the gross weekly payroll, and that shows 3 lines, a yellow line that bounces around $4 million a week. These are actual payrolls, numbers that come off the out of a payroll system, bounces around $4 million a week for last year. It shows a grey line, which is what wages were when just in the lead up to and just after the merger, and that bounced around $3 million a week. And it shows what the wages numbers are for this organisation currently, and it's bouncing along very much near the same numbers as 2015-16. So what has happened is this council's now been able to return its wages, salaries and wages costs back to the same level as we saw at and around the time of merger. That's despite award increases increasing by about 14.4%, and the population of the Central Coast increasing by 6.6%. So there's been an overall 20% improvement fundamentally in productivity across that period. And we've been able to see that, as I said, we've been able to keep our costs under control. And as I said, there continues to be, I think, some misinformation provided to the community about our salaries and wages being out of control. As I said, That was the case up until about 10 months ago, but some serious action has been taken, and we have reduced our salaries and wages costs by around 25%. An important point to point out is right at the beginning of the investment report, you'll see simple profit and loss statements for each of the major trading areas. So you've got consolidated trading summary. I'd like to draw the attention to the next table, which is the water and sewer trading summary, and we can see that the water and sewer fund is yet again making a loss. This is driven significantly by the lower than anticipated, and I guess lower than is necessary income streams that is provided in water and sewer. So yet again, $4.6 million year to date loss in water and sewer. As you would be aware, and again, many of the people who are interested in council affairs would be aware that council is seeking revised charges in IPART for the following year. And part of that will be to correct that ongoing operating loss in water and sewer, because otherwise that'll have to be made up by ratepayers' income or rates income, but also to significantly reinvest in the operations and maintenance of the water and sewer business to improve water quality and environmental outcomes. So in summary, what we've seen is a really significantly in some ways an outstanding turnaround from 2 years of $90 million losses to now running in surplus and ahead of budget. And when we look at the public inquiry that's just occurred, one of the significant factors was that people were not keeping their eye on the financials of the organisation and did not understand the underlying issues, both cash and operating performance. And what we're trying to do here is to be very explicit to the community about how we're travelling both in a cash position and in an underlying operating performance. And I'm very pleased to say that in both levels, we're making significant improvements over how we've traded in the last couple of years.
Thank you, Mr. Farm. I absolutely agree with you. I think it's a great job the organisation is doing at the moment. The numbers are pretty spectacular, really, given the history of particularly the last sort of 24 months, I guess. I think, and I do want to reiterate the point you made, the fact that we have a lot of critics out there who are making statements about how things were. And they keep implying that is still the same. And as you have pointed out very clearly, the commencement of this financial year, as from July 1, 2021, we are ahead of budget. We're doing better than we said we were going to do. And it would be really helpful if some of those critics out there could actually tell the truth instead of misrepresenting data that they may have got from ex-disgruntled staff people about how things actually are travelling inside the Central Coast. The numbers speak for themselves. Mr. Farmer is financially trained. I am financially trained. And we have a team of financial professionals who are all on the same page. And we are delivering exactly what we said we were going to do, which some people, I understand today, may have suggested the council never delivers what it said it was going to do. I don't think you can get a clearer example of doing what we said we can do than the financial numbers in a very large organisation with a total budget approaching $700 million of being ahead of budget. So we'll leave it at that. But thank you, Mr. Farmer, a very good explanation of where we are. And again, demonstrating the commitment the organisation made to deliver things, and we are meeting those commitments. So with that, I will now seek to resolve the resolution displayed on the screen that the council note the monthly financial report for September 21. I now move to item 2.11, which is financial reports audit extension. And I will ask Ms. Cowley to actually speak briefly to that.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. This report is to seek the approval and advise the community of the fact that the Audit Office of New South Wales has requested Council to seek an extension to lodge its audited financial statements until by the 17th of December 2021. As many of the community might know, the Council financial reports must be prepared by the 31st of October 2021. Council staff has met its obligations and has submitted the financial reports, the draft financial reports, mid-October in Council, and had a resolution to pass them to the auditors. And we also prepared the financial statements and provided them to Council on 25th of August. The Audit Office has clarified that due to the fact that the audit of the 2019-2020 financial reports were not concluded until the 10th of May, they were not able to do the significant planning and interim work, which would normally occur in January to May until June. Incidentally, Council staff were also obviously involved with all of that financial statements for 2019 and 2020 and finalizing the queries from the auditors, but Council staff were able to complete those and also complete this year's financial statements in time. Thank you, Mr. Administrator.
Thank you, Ms. Cowley. Yes, I think it's, as per my comments earlier, it's another good example where the Council said it was going to get its financial affairs in order, and putting in the draft statements to New South Wales Audit by the end of October was one of those things we needed and wanted to do. We've met that timeline easily. We in fact had draft financials available earlier, but with some adjustments we had to make, which were not of our making, which were talked about a couple of weeks ago. We still lodged the accounts by the middle of October, which is well ahead of the deadline, which is the end of October. It is somewhat disappointing that Audit New South Wales, whilst I understand their difficulties because the previous audit was not finished until pretty late on, as Ms. Cowley said, until well into May, it is still somewhat disappointing that they can't find their way to clear us up so that we are free to keep moving forward. With this way, we are going to be stuck working with the auditors right through till the end of the year. And then again, we will be starting pretty much as soon as we've got back in the new year, we will be back into hopefully a normal cycle, and where we will be able to lodge our accounts probably earlier than I hope mid-October. And of course, the Auditor General hopefully will be able to consider them at a much sharper time frame. But nonetheless, it's another good example of us saying we were going to do something and delivering it. So congratulations to the finance team. You've done a fantastic job in getting that stuff together and getting it ready, given that you were still trying to finish off the previous year, right in, as late as May this year. So congratulations there. It's a job well done. I'd like you to pass my thanks on to the finance team, Ms. Cowley, if you would. With that, we'll seek to resolve to adopt the resolutions that are displayed on the screen. And with that, I will now declare the meeting closed for tonight at 7:21 p.m.